Okay, I'm going to do a review right now for the upcoming assessment on um, the minister's black veil. We'll have that assessment on Thursday. And looking at some of the questions that we'll be addressing in the story, let's kind of do a little bit of a review on what's going to be on there. Remember, one of the key words is parable. And remember that a parable is something that teaches a message, or it has a moral that you want to learn from it. And so in the minister's black veil, really the parable can take on different types of action. But remember that the veil itself is the symbol of that parable. Okay. Um, One of the things in a parable is why do the parishioners have such an intense response to the minister's veil? I mean, when he first comes out, it looks really, really dark, and they've never seen something over his face, so they're kind of, you know, taken aback by it. And their first thing is they're frightened by it because, one, they can't see the minister's face, so they don't know what facial expressions are going on behind his face. They don't know what he's thinking, and it really bothers them from that one. There's a passage in the minister's black veil, and it's quoted as, "What can you infer about this?" Okay, and remember, infer means that you're going to, after you hear it, kind of not necessarily next thing make a prediction about, but this, what can you infer about the belief system of the congregation, and the congregation being the people who are listening to him or following him. And it states, "And while he prayed, the veil lay heavily on his uplifted countenance. Did he seek to hide it from the dread being whom he was addressing?" And the dread being God. And so while he's giving his sermon, they're not even listening to it. They're ignoring the whole point of the sermon, which is about God and forgiveness and sin. And so they're choosing to ignore his message because they're too fixated on the veil itself. One meaning of Mr. Hooper's veil is relationships between people, and they're never completely clear. When you have relationships between people, they're not always out there in the open. So the question is, what can you infer about his wife, Elizabeth, when she asked him to remove the veil? And he says, no, he can't. She's not. It's not like she wants to support his decision or anything. She's upset with it. It's like, I'm married to you, and you won't even for me remove this from her face. And it makes her angry for wearing the veil. The next one is in the parable. How does it convey the Puritan attitude towards human nature? Remember the Puritan beliefs that we went over in class. This was a very radical group of individuals, and they were basically pessimistic. Remember that when they thought about, when you're born to sin, and you're probably going to hell. So they're very pessimistic, negative individuals. One of the questions, who takes care of Mr. Hooper during his final illness, ends up being Elizabeth, his wife. And a moral lesson from this story, one of the moral lessons might be that, guilty secrets that we have personally can separate us from one another. And so sometimes those secrets that remain secret, really keeps us from getting closer than what we should. A social lesson from this story, not a moral, but a social one, like in public, is that people usually protect their personal privacy by wearing a public mask. So people every day are wearing a mask, you just can't see it. And for members of his church, when they first saw Mr. Hooper's veil, the quote is, "An unsought pathos came hand in hand with awe." And how did these people feel about him? Well, really, they thought the veil was awful. They were scared of it. They were intimidated by it. They didn't know how to react to it. Okay. Over what group does the veiled minister seem to have the most power? And that's really his congregation. He has total power over them eventually, once they come to terms with his veil. And which statement would express the central theme? Well, the central theme of the story is people with faith can overcome any hardship. And Mr. Cooper, Cooper was the central character, the minister who suffered and suffered and suffered, but he never lost his faith in people, his faith in God, and he was able to overcome their snubbing of him in public. And the village position in the story is what he would represent really is logic and reason, because he's a doctor. So with him, he doesn't look at the veil as anything other than, somebody wearing a veil for whatever reason, but it has nothing to do with, something that's on a different level, something supernatural. And a message about human nature that is usually conveyed, very conveyed in this story, is by Elizabeth when she's nursing Mr. Hooper on his deathbed. And that message is that love for somebody endures no matter what the person does. And so even though she couldn't understand what he was doing and she was angry at him for the way he went about doing it, her love endured and she still took care of him even though she didn't understand it. And the message that might be conveyed by the veiled minister at the wedding, when they're having the wedding, and he's kind of telling the congress, the parishioners who are there for it, that secrets between people can destroy trust and love and the relationship itself. And he warns them about that. Don't keep secrets. And then the black veil mostly symbolizes, secret sin. And that's what it most likely symbolizes in the parable. And based on this story, if you had to predict the author's view on human nature, he would basically say that human beings are naturally pessimistic individuals, and they don't look at the bright side of things. They look at the negative side of things. And so the first thing they do is look at negativity. One of the passages that we can make an inference from is, and quote, "The next day the whole village of Milford talked of little else than Parson Hooper's black veil. That and the mystery concealed behind it supplied a topic of discussion between acquaintances meeting in the street, and a good woman gossiping at their open windows. It was the first item of news that the tavern keeper told his guests, and the children babbled of it on their way to school." Basically what this is telling you about the author thinks that human beings gossip way too much. They just talk, and that's what causes more issue with people in a society, is because people just want to get the dirt on it. Another passage that you can infer, tell me what the meaning will be, is when the friends show his innermost heart to his friend, the lover to his best beloved, when the man does not vainly shrink from the eye of his Creator, loathsomely treasuring up the secret of his sin, then deem me a monster, for the symbol beneath which I have lived and died. I look around me and lo, on every visage a black veil. And he's basically saying, let anybody else judge me who has never committed sin. Because if you look around, everybody is wearing a black veil for their sins that they are hiding right now. They just don't want to admit it. And basically each person, they hide his or her darkest secrets for fear of what other people will think, and that is always an issue. On a vocab level, it was strange to observe how slowly this venerable man came to conscious of something. And venerable basically means respected man. Another vocab word is impertinent. Why is the narrator surprised that the impertinent people in the congregation failed to ask Mr. Hooper the reason for the veil? And really, it's just because, it might be considered disrespectful or inappropriate to ask him about it instead of, so they chose to ignore the issue instead of addressing it. Lastly, there are 4 potential essay questions that you can write on, and each one deals with, obviously the symbolism and stuff that goes along with the story. I'll read the actual paragraphs and or the prompts. Prompt number 1 is, in the story, a lady of the village says, "How strange that a simple black veil, such as any woman might wear on her bonnet, should become such a terrible thing in Mr. Cooper's face." You're to basically write an essay exploring what this statement means in relation to, say, objects and their symbolic power. Okay, so you're talking about, an object such as the black veil, and all of a sudden this veil, which is a normal piece of cloth that you put on a face, symbolizes something else. You take that and kind of like giving you an example in the Columbine shooting over in Colorado, the symbol there was that the kids wore long overcoats, black overcoats, to hide their weapons. Now before then, anybody could wear an overcoat to school, anybody could wear an overcoat anywhere else, but as soon as that happened and that's what they wore, the overcoat became a symbol all of a sudden of violence and danger. So, with that being said, that's what it's talking about with how something or an object can create symbolic power. Question question number 2 that you could write on is, do you think Mr. Hooper's veil is a form of confession? Is he making a statement? Might it be both? Write an essay describing the conclusion you reach about the significance of the veil and support your solution with examples from the story. So essentially what it's saying is, he didn't go out and tell everybody his sin. In fact, when he dies, no one knows what it is exactly that he's done. But the fact that he's wearing it physically for people to see is kind of like him throwing out there, man, I wonder what he's done because he's showing it. And so, is he making a statement? You bet he is. He's also living He's a living statement of I sin, and I'm covering my face to hide my sin. And notice that no one in the story at all even asked. Okay. And then the next one is in the minister's black veil. The minister's last words include these passages. Why do you tremble at me alone? I look around and lo, on every visage is a black veil. And what did he mean? And I can tell you right now that what people are afraid of him because of what he physically looks like with this veil over his face. And he's like, why are you afraid of me? You should be afraid of each other. Imagine all the sins that other people, avarice, greed, lust, anger, violence, all those types of things are different aspects of what's going on with people and who they are, but they hide it very, very well. And then question number 4. Much of Hawthorne's message is that good and evil are not easily separated, that all people have those qualities within themselves. These ideas are most clearly seen in the contrast between Mr. Hooper and the people who interact with him. So in a brief essay, describe the ways in which the following people and events illustrate Hawthorne's themes and include 2 examples. Okay? So what it's saying is they have good and evil, but sometimes you can't tell the difference between what's good and what's bad. And even though they have those qualities within themselves, here's some examples that you can write on. Being morally strict, kind of black and white standards. How can that be good or bad? And people's sense of their own righteousness, thinking that they're better than other people. The moral cowardice of the deputies who fail to ask him about the veil. These are people who are men of the cloth, or people of his equal, and they just they're too afraid to ask. Parishioners, those are his followers, are speechless and confused, and guiltily uneasy reaction to his presumed judgment on them. And then the fable going around that the stares of dead people motivated the veil. Rumors that had committed a great crime. Hooper's whole life becoming shrouded in dismal suspicions. Okay, these are things that can be good or bad, that are characterized, and you have to break them down and kind of explain them. So if you want to pick a couple of them and write, like I said, 2 paragraphs. That's primarily Minister's Black Veil. Good luck on your assessment.